Hello, everyone. This is Marcellus Joyner, and welcome to another fourth episode of Blackademia and Hip-Hop Culture, featuring the man, the myth, the
Oh
legend,
man, please.
my man, Los the Librarian.
Man, what's going on?
What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing good.
Good,
How
good,
about you?
good. I'm I'm doing well, man. Working and just trying to keep it pushing. Uh, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself before I begin asking questions?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, my name's Carlos Grooms. I'm a research and instruction librarian here at North Carolina A&T.
Thank you, Pride.
All right. I am I went to Winston-Salem State University
Uh-huh.
where I got my undergrad in history and minor in sociology. Um, I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and born and raised there. And I went to all HBCUs, North Carolina Central University, for my master's in library and information science. And
You can Pride.
right. So, I've been in libraries now uh close to 20 years, I think. Yeah. Both academic and public library experience. Man, it's absolute passion I discovered um in adulthood, and I'm grateful for it, much like the passion I got for hip hop music. So
Gotcha. Gotcha.
it's a labor of love, you know, coming into work and being able to do what I do day to day basis. So I'm thankful for it.
That's awesome because a lot of people never get to do a job that they love or have a career that they love. So it's good when it doesn't feel like work every time you walk in the door.
Absolutely.
All right.
I
Well,
know exactly what that feels like. It can be very painful.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right,
I had a couple of those jobs before I got into the library field, so
right.
we on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hop into it. Let me get to this first question. In what ways do you incorporate hip hop culture into library programs or events to engage the community?
So a big thing that we've done here at Bluefoot Library, we have programs for our students at the end of the semester where we do a exam study break. So it's end of the semester, try to just kick back, relax before exams really take off, and we order the students pizza and drinks and other snacks, and we chill here in the library. And what I do, I'm the unofficial DJ during those programs. So what I like to do is you know give the students, being from a different generation, I play what they listen to today, but I also drop little nuggets of you know hip hop from the golden era, um, which is that era's influenced me a lot, and I have a lot of appreciation for the younger artists and the newer artists today. But yeah, so I think that's the bridge that kind of connects us, as older generations, as librarians. We use the music in our programs to really bring folks together. It really enhances the program. Folks have a good time. And I remember a program where I was playing some of J. Cole's artists, and a lot of the students looked at me like, "What you know about that?" And that's usually my line for them. I'm like, "What you know about that?" So yeah, it was a good way to just connect, and it's another. I'm another familiar face for the student after that. When they come back into the library, oh, that's the dude that's playing the music. So we use the music in the programs to make that connection.
Okay.
Mhm.
Has your personal connection to hip hop impacted your approach to promoting literacy and education within the library?
Yeah, so I mean, hip hop, especially from what's considered the golden era, like from, you know, 89 to probably 90, 98.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of inspirational hip hop, a lot of what you call conscious hip hop, was kind of birthed from that era, and it really introduced me to a lot. It introduced my passion for history, for Black history. It introduced me to jazz music. Um, so it really enhanced my cultural curiosity for the Black community, just learning more about my community. And, I like to use those reference points um, when I'm engaging students, when I'm having these conversations. I put them on to artists I was put on to who, you know, made me want to dive deeper into maybe, lyrical content that I was introduced to. Um, a profound jazz artist who I was introduced to through the sampling, the art of sampling soul music, with De La Soul and a tribe called Quest, just to hear the music that they listen to. So it just kind of it takes you on a ride that you don't even really know you're about to go on.
Right.
So that's kind of been my approach, and it's impacted me and influenced me to really get into um a lot of literature that I got into around that time. You know, one of the books I was introduced to hip hop music was Stolen Legacy by um, GM James, and just the I think historically people like to geographically move Egypt out of Africa, and
Yes, very much so.
right, and so he kind of in his book, and he was a professor at Johnson C. Smith. He kind of put it in perspective, like, no, that's Africa, and those were Black people.
Okay,
You know,
you have to put me on to that one. The the overall subject is pulling me in, but the fact that he went to Johnson C. Smith,
oh yeah,
I got to get to know him now. So
absolutely, and it's a classic, really, and conscious Black history. Um, so yeah, a lot of they don't like for you to talk about historians like him, but we have to, as librarians, do our due diligence and introduce our community to these authors. There's a ton of Black historians who really was speaking to the consciousness of Black people, and because historically, they just kind of we've been beat down about who we are, where we're from, our contributions to civilization. So, a lot of the hip hop music from our era really addressed those issues. And so, that's just kind of the foundation of my journey into, academia. It
mhm.
wasn't the classroom because I wasn't really uh being influenced in that space. I was being influenced by the hip hop artists I was listening to. And that made me go into the classroom with a different perspective. So
I
that's
understand.
why I have a big appreciation for hip hop music and culture.
I understand where you're coming from with that, because a lot of material that I read and literature that I read, I had to go outside of my regulated English and history classes in high school to dig deeper, reading books such as The Invisible Man,
Yeah,
A Gathering of Old Men, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And some of those, some of those are staples in some schools, but not in a lot. So a lot of African American literature I had to seek out on my own. Um,
yeah,
but with the question that you just answered, you hit a lot of points, man. And one thing that really draws me in is, when you were talking about the sample, how sampling, being interested in where the samples came from and following, doing your detective work to find
Yeah,
out where those samples came from leads you to other genres of music.
yeah,
That's why hip hop and jazz are I don't know if I want to call them first cousins or or,
absolutely.
or uncle and nephew,
Yeah.
but you can't have
Father, son, mother, daughter. I mean, it's
well,
the rich.
you can say father and son, but
Absolutely.
rock is mixed in there with it too. Aerosmith and Run DMC struck platinum. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
well, I guess just metaphorically and probably literally, um,
Hmm.
that was the clash and the mix that changed the rhythm of music that we were listening to because those were very much very different areas. And when they came out with that song, I went to a predominantly white school, predominantly white schools coming up, K through 12. But when that happened, that was the thing at the dance that put everybody on the dance
Absolutely.
floor all at one time because it was the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
So you have to look at it in this way. Me being a historian, being a genealogist and a historian, people may ask, well, why are you talking about this subject, or you know,
Mm,
wh what's so important about it? But one of the key elements in history is that by decade, 10-year increments, an event can very quickly become history. Hip hop is at its 50th, and I don't think people started really looking at its history and where it came from until about 25 or 30 years in.
yeah.
So we're kind of behind the curve, very much so. But you hit a lot of points that drive that home. So
And I'm gonna add, we having a rough time adjusting to aging in hip hop because I think, the music industry has conditioned us to believe that only young people can engage in hip hop music. And what's happening is hip hop is getting older. And so, it's kind of weird for some people to see older artists still dropping music. I mean, I would what people don't realize is one of my favorite artists today is Rhapsody. And
oh yeah.
yeah,
Ooh.
this she is, I think she's closer to my age. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
And she has made an impact in hip hop culture. And
Yeah.
the younger audience has embraced her. So we're kind of seeing that dynamic shift. Um, there's some positives and negatives behind that. So
Oh yeah. And we just have to flesh it out because this is the thing. Um, and always say this, and people may disagree or agree with me, but hip hop is going through the same changes as jazz did.
mm,
Jazz was that rebel music back in the day, that the people on the outskirts of society. But nowadays, what is jazz? Jazz is upper echelon. Um,
yeah,
in these upper level spaces, so to speak. It's almost classical, but you also have to remember that jazz went through so many iterations where it changed constantly and in order to keep going. Um, and this is just my personal opinion before we move on to the next question.
mhm,
People have to really ask themselves, um, why put a age cap on an artist if they're saying
right,
something relevant and if what they say still speaks to you? Um, I think that question was really, really driven home when Jay-Z did um what was the album that he released just as the pandemic was coming out?
444.
444. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, a lot of his content was, still the bling or whatever, but it was, you could tell in some of the things that he was saying, this is a man who has entered into his 40s and 50s. So he's not talking about the same stuff that he was talking about at 20, and you can hear it.
Yeah.
And you might not agree with everything that is said in the record, but you know, when he's talking about how to buy the block back.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm
That's a
giving you $1 million a game
yeah.
for 9.99.
Right.
You
The
know,
economic dynamic to it now that he's hit a certain threshold with his wealth level. So he's having a certain conversation that some of us aspire to connect to. So there's that, right? Because
right,
there's that's a whole nother conversation about, the economic conditions of the Black community. And, having an artist like Jay-Z, who's at a wealth level many of us will never see. Um, he has a certain perspective that
right.
you can agree with or disagree with, but and that's just the multi layers of the hip hop, what it's turned into. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
it's fascinating. It's good to see that. It's good to see that. So
I'm excited because like hip hop is only a couple of months older than me. So,
right, right, right,
I'm living through every iteration of it. And, it'd be interesting to see, when I get ready to retire from uh from working, who's still out that's in my age range or even older.
right.
They're saying what are they doing because they haven't just stayed in music either. They ventured into different areas as well. So with that being said, let's move on to the next question. How has hip hop music shaped your cultural identity and influenced the way you perceive the world around you?
Man. So, I mean, profoundly. Um, I think what one thing my dad never shied away from was a controversial conversation, and I appreciate him for that, giving that to me at a young age. And the same time he was doing that, hip hop music was teaching me as well. And I think one of the watershed moments for me in American history was Rodney King
Mm,
and the riots. I was a kid when all of that happened, and but I knew what it was about because my family dynamic, the village that raised me allowed for me to be in the kitchen when grown folks was having those discussions. Now I had to be quiet, but I was able to be in the kitchen when they were having those discussions, and we saw what was happening on television. And when I heard their discussions, and then I go back and listen to, the Chronic, or you listen to NWA, and you hear about how we're perceived, as Black men in particular, in culture, in society, and how the police deal with us, how they're trained to engage with us, and how I should respond.
mhm,
That's the most important part. And I think you're a very fortunate young man to have, older folks in your life teaching you how to engage with law enforcement.
mhm,
And that to me, and unfortunately, like that is a huge part of my identity. Like being a Black man in society and understanding that a lot of people perceive me as a threat. And I remember, being 15 years old, I got in trouble with some friends, and the police pulled us over, and they on Jamestown Road and Jonestown Road in Winston Salem, and they had us outside the car, sitting on the curb. And yeah, we had just gotten a fight. We didn't start it, you know what I'm saying? But nonetheless, we sitting on the curb, and when the police was engaging with us, um, there was a level of cooperation that I had. Hey, my dad name, this is my dad name, and you can call him at such and such number. And I'm the only one out of my friends that did that. You feel what I'm saying? Some
Hmm.
of us was combative, and rightfully so, in the to a degree, but at the same time, when you 15 and 16 years old, it's nighttime, you sitting on the side of the road, you gotta, you have to use your head a little bit,
Right.
and that's what I was taught. So I'm like, yeah, my name is this. This is my father's name. This is his phone number. So give him a call. You feel what I'm saying? And now I have those procedures and those protocols in my head, you know, because understanding my identity through hip hop music and how I'm being perceived as a threat. And so I need to have this. I was educated in having this protocol when engaging people out here. And I still roll with that to this day.
Hmm.
When I'm pulled over today, I put my windows down. I turn on my interior light. I put both hands on the steering wheel.
10 and 2, 10 and 2.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the last times I was pulled over, it was late at night. I'm leaving the library because I worked here late, and it was I get off at 12, and he's asking me like, where are you coming from? Which is crazy. Right?
Right.
Why does it matter where I'm coming from? But instead of saying that, I'm like, from the library. Now, being a black man at 1 o'clock in the morning, telling a police officer that I'm leaving the library was an absolute, it was absurd to him. He was like, and you know what he said to me? What library is open at 1 o'clock in the morning? I said, oh, okay. I said, well, North Carolina A&T is 24/5 from Sunday to Friday.
Yes,
I
sir.
said, right. And I told him, not only we're 24/5, but also UNCG.
Yep. And
I
most
said, if you,
most college libraries.
I said, right. I told him, if you go further out in Winston-Salem, Winston-Salem closes at 1 o'clock in the morning. Wake Forest University. So I'm just, so low key, I'm kind of pissed off. So, but I'm trying to educate this man at the same time. And but but that's how we're perceived. I'm an absolute liar for doing 10 miles over the speed limit. 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm being pulled over, and me saying that was just crazy to him. So I think if it wasn't for my awareness about who I am and how I'm perceived, I could be in this different. My life experience could have been very different, I
Gotcha.
think.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate hip hop music. I appreciate my family for educating me on those things.
And it's interesting that you used NWA, because I was in junior high school when NWA came out, and man, hearing their music for the first time, you know,
Yeah,
man, I
it was
was like,
crazy.
well, the thing is, this is like, you know, one thing that we did not see coming when hip hop started was as different areas throughout the United States started doing their own thing, we began telling stories of African Americans and what life is like in this part of
Mhm.
America, in this city, in this state. Now, everything may not be the same across the board, but unfortunately, well, no, I'm gonna say this. There's good and bad things where there are similarities, but what you just talked about is one of the main things.
Con-
Everybody,
That's consistent.
yeah, that's consistent, and
Absolutely.
it's sad on or society in general.
Yeah.
It's sad. But there's positives too, where there are similarities across the board. Everybody, you've heard that rap song that talks about um the how family life was in that area too. So there are positives and negatives, but
Yeah.
that's the thing, the intangibles that people weren't expecting as it has progressed and grown. That
Right.
we don't even have to travel to another area where we know, you know what I'm saying? Like there's just certain
Absolutely.
things that we know, both positive and negative, that's similar across the board.
Absolutely. And if you outside the culture and you don't know it, all right? So it's you don't know about the positives and the negatives. They teach and I think they condition society to to view hip hop as a negative thing, all negative experiences, you know, negative content. But when you're really in the culture, when you really in hip hop music, you understand that we got subgenres, right? There's a variety of artists you can listen to who speak about a plethora of experiences. So, while in hindsight is 2020, a lot of being a student of hip hop, going back, because I was a little younger when NWA came. I was a student, so I was going back and I'm like, what are they talking about? You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And just making that connection, just being just a few years younger, just going back to it and looking at the similarities of how their experience with the police from Goody Mob's experience with the police, or you know what I'm saying? Like it
Yeah.
was like wow, like it's so much they have in common, right?
Right.
So but and then just the social, the dynamics of the content Goody Mob talked about versus NWA. So
Yeah.
but that there was still that similarities in running, engaging law enforcement and
And
being black men in society. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, now me being a historian, like just like you said, as I got older, and listening to the music, but also, looking at that area that certain artists come from, and then starting to research how African Americans lived in the area, like, from segregation, Jim Crow to segregation, like
right.
you start looking at how it developed and start to key in on specifics of that area through the artist's music.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna leave that point right there because I'm gonna ask this next question. Can you share a specific moment or experience where a hip hop song or
Oh
artist
man.
had a significant impact on your emotions
Whew.
or perspective?
Man, listen. I think a lot of, and just speaking from black male perspective, I think a lot of times we in our developmental and impressional years, we get hurt and we don't really talk about it. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean is like, emotionally being heartbroken. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
got I got my heart broke in 10th grade.
Mm,
Uh
formidable year.
oh my gosh. My 10th grade year, and was the first time I experienced like betrayal with people that I know, people that say they're your friends and people you're around a lot, you know what I'm saying? And it was a learning experience for me that people so close to you could do something behind your back that really shake you up, that stick with you, right? And yeah, so I got my heart broke in the 10th grade, and that same year, uh Outkast came out with ATL,
Mm,
and they dropped a song called I believe it's called Mainstream.
yeah,
And Cujo Goody's verse in that song, man, just talked about a friend betraying him. He was like, I let you stay in my crib. Now you know where I live.
right.
When you was hungry, I fed you a hot meal. And look at the hand you deal. And I just remember that. I just remember being just so blown away, and the connection I made with the words he was saying and what I was going through emotionally, you know, because I just felt like whatever experience that brother was talking about in that moment, it was so profound that he really talked, he really spoke it into existence on that album.
Hmm.
I think it was a level of vulnerability.
And therapeutic.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's when you're a young black man and you get your heart broke, it's not something that you just go around talking about.
Right.
A lot of times we internalize,
Yeah, even
and
as
then
grown
we
men, take it on into to adulthood.
absolutely, you take it into adulthood, you damage future relationships because you don't really understand what happened to you. You haven't had people to really talk to you about it and how it works, you know. But I think in that moment, that album, that song, that verse, um, that's one of my favorite albums to this day. ATL is just it spoke to me on so many levels. And when you are that young, and you go through a heartbreak. And I think at the same time that same year, I experienced one of my best friends passing away.
Mm,
I was hey man, 16 years old. That was a lot for a young person to digest, in a summer.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
golly, my girl cheated on me. I got my homeboy died. Like, I really needed somebody to sit down and talk to, and Cool Joe Goody, he
You talk.
yeah, he did, yes he did. So yeah, man, that was a tough time for me, and when I listen to that album, it takes me back to that time, and just emotionally where I was, you know what I mean? It kind of brings you back to that moment. So that's one of my favorite albums to this day.
Oh, hey man, Dungeon Family, the entire Dungeon Family is on point. Outkast is probably, well, I ain't gonna say probably. Outkast is my top duo, top group. And the reason why I say that is because, you had people from the South before them, such as the Ghetto Boys, UGK, and 8 Ball and MJG. But, those groups spoke to very specific things that happens in our community and our society. Not, and trust me, I got love for them, and definitely got some songs I love by them. But when Outkast came out, it was the way
Mhm.
the whole movement went and how they talked about the South. Like, you know how Slick Rick is a storyteller and everything he says is very vivid.
Yeah,
That combination of Andre and Big Boy, just describing anything about the South,
everyday life.
everyday life in the
Mhm.
South. That's another like watershed moment in hip hop where things change because you were being given shown a window
Right.
of the total South, not just uh the trap part of the South or the hustler part of the South or the pimping, you
Absolutely.
know, it was like a total window into how life in the South was, even though it was Atlanta centric. Just
Mhm.
like we said before, there are shared experiences if you are Black and Southern. that
Right.
you go from Carolina to Florida down to
Mhm.
Louisiana, you know what I'm saying? There's going to be something similar or something that you can key into, like a plate of fish and grits. You, you know what I'm saying? Or someone who knows how to correctly make some mac and cheese.
Right.
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? And you know, I'm kidding around, but you know, it goes deeper than that. Um, so let me move on to the next question. In what ways do you think hip hop has contributed to the social and political discussions, to social and political discussions? And how has that resonated with you personally?
Well, I think politically, hip hop has been in the center for since its inception. Um, Especially like being a student of where hip hop has come from, um, really not being socially accepted.
Mhm.
Um, I think hip hop and being older now, my perspective has evolved over time. You know, during the 80s and 90s, when hip hop was really being ridiculed for its explicit lyrics, content, and content, degrading of women in the music songs, and I think rightfully so. The folks of the time expressed the issues with the music, and as a younger person, I didn't really understand it totally because I'm just like, man, it's just music. You know what I'm saying? It's just but being older now, family dynamics have changed. Understanding of the impression that the music could have on uh, on the youth and how that influences you to move and think out here in society. I think um, you know they raise some good issues, and I think there's still issues to this day. There's a time where yeah, it's the degrading of women, the, the promotion of drug dealing, the now to the promotion of drug usage,
Mhm.
right? And we've gone through all of these iterations, and I think there's a controversy on the female rappers now that's kind of spearheading the culture in their explicit lyrics and content. So there's all of these commotions, and now mind you, that is the one perspective, the negative perspective that comes out of of looking at hip hop music and culture. But me being of it, being from it, I can look at it from both ways, and I can say, you know what, they got a point. You know, there are some issues here. It was some issues then, and there's some issues now, and I think we need to be uh, aware of what we're telling the youth. Yes, there are positive artists out there, and we hope that their message permeates. Right? We hope that their message gets out because the variety isn't like it used to be back in the day when
Right.
you
It's
used to
very
turn on.
very one-sided and
Right.
commercialization pushes what's tries to push what's popular. Uh,
Absolutely.
but you know, there's always a counter to that. Even with when you focus on politics, you know, if society is being driven in one way, there's
Mhm.
always like a counterculture that develops.
Absolutely.
So you know, we have to be mindful that yeah, what maybe what's popular and what's being pushed
Hmm.
um may not be putting us in the best of light, but there's always a pushback or a counterculture that develops out of you know, that
Yeah.
rails up against what's popular.
Yeah. And it's the see this generation, they have it, in my opinion, they have it much harder than we had it in terms of all the commercialization, and promoting of content, right? I mean, yeah, we had television, we had music videos, we had magazines, but this social media is exploded and they are constantly, all of this stuff is constantly in their face. They carry it with them in their hands, even during school. Like
Hmm.
now they got some political, some legislation that may be coming down to kind of control what type of devices students can have in K through 12 in the classroom, because this stuff is constantly in their face. They have to combat it all the time or engage in it. They're immersed in it. So I think for us, we had our moments and then we can go back out and live normal lives and be in the moment in our communities. But for them, for the youth, it is much more challenging to be able to disconnect from that. So um but it's just it's at the center. It's at the center of politics. And I just think we have to do we you hope that, like you said, the positive side of hip hop can permeate all the noise that's going on, and you can hear these positive artists that's out here really want that's socially and politically aware, and that wants to raise consciousness and through their music, right? So it's just really, it's harder to get to these days. It's harder to get to that music. During my time, it was part of the popular culture,
Right.
you know, to hear Arrested Development or to hear The Roots, to hear Common, to hear, golly, man, it's KRS-One. It's just so many artists that I can think of from that time where you can turn on the radio and hear that message.
Jungle
But
Brothers.
absolutely, but yet the negative aspects about hip hop were the loudest, even though you had more diversity in the type of hip hop music you can listen to back in back in those days. And I just, it's hard. It's the youth got their hands full today, but we're really sorting that out.
Right. One thing I will say is because of all the technology and social media outlets, you have the opportunity to put a, how can I put it? To voice, give voice to what should and shouldn't be. Just like we're talking right now, 20 years ago,
Mm,
us talking in this capacity may have been regulated to just um, a librarian conference, but now, as we speak, this can be put out on YouTube or Instagram, and the youth can access it. And not now, how many may access it, we can't worry about the number, but
mm,
the conversation is out there. So, you have to think about that in, on the positive side, that there there are different avenues where the content that speaks against the negative part of it can be reached.
absolutely.
And that brings us to our next question. Are there any specific hip hop artists or subgenres that you feel a deep connection to? And why do they resonate with you on a personal level?
Oh, I just mentioned a few of them. I think the subgenre that really hit hard with me was the conscious hip hop music. I was a huge fan of Native Tongues, um, Queen Latifah, De La Soul. A Tribe Called Quest might be my. It's just hard to say really who my all-time favorite group is, but they're certainly one of them. I mean, my ritual. I purchased so many CDs. I was a collector. I still got my collection in my garage at home. Got them boxed up. But my ritual was to, when I go either to Peaches or to Circuit City, I purchase that CD, crack it open, put it in the player, and I read the credits. And that's how I really just really dived into the music, right? You know, who produced what, who sampled what jazz artist was brought into it, and a lot of the hip hop music I like, you know, has a very big in, big influence from jazz or soul music. Um, and so I was able to learn about other artists that way, um, learn more about Black culture, and I would say De La has a not De La, but Tribe Called Quest has a profound impact on me. Um, you know, it was so it broke my heart when my boy passed away,
Oh yeah,
Five
man.
Dog. It was and that's a whole nother conversation about, you know, our health disparities in our communities dealing with diabetes,
Yeah.
having access to you know the nutrition and all of those things. You know, those are things that I've dealt with in my family.
Hmm.
In fact, you know, learning about what happened to Five Dog was profound. It was one of the, you know, first times as a young person that I'm like, you know, this diabetes thing is a real thing that's impacting our communities. Um, Jay Dilla,
Yeah.
profound impact. And hindsight being 2020, I never knew who he was, but I was always a fan of his music.
Right.
And I didn't know it until, you know, I started getting more mature about hip hop and who are the creators, right? And just his impact on that subgenre,
Right.
right? That the soul music, the sampling of jazz, like he is a pioneer. Um, and him dealing with lupus, right?
Right.
Like, you know, so I mean, it's a lot to unpack when it comes to, you know, our health and who these folks are as real people. You know what I'm saying? So I just made those personal connections with a lot of the artists based on a lot what they was going through. And you know, and it's and it seems like when you listen to hip hop music, especially back then, it just seemed like they were these giants living these lives that you never lived, or you know you didn't want to live, right? But
Exactly.
that subgenre I felt connected to because yeah, I live that life too. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm, you know, because they're talking about everyday life and everyday things. So it's Common is one of my favorite artists. Him and Pete Rock just dropped an amazing album that's
Yeah.
out now.
I
And
gotta listen to I gotta listen to the full track.
oh man, it's crazy. It's from start to finish. That's what I'm listening to right now.
But
The
Carlos,
auditorium.
you don't something it, when you're talking about health, because I think it's funny because like I said, you know, I'm just as old as hip hop or just trailing it. So, you know, it's this thing where, you know, artists die because they um have been shot or gotten into some type
Right.
of trouble. But when it, you know, it's different when it's a health issue. I think the first rap artist I remember dying from a health issue was MC Trouble. She had
Mm,
um throat cancer. She passed away from throat cancer.
right.
Um, then I think the next person was uh, um
It's starting to roll in now.
yeah, because everybody's getting older. Um,
Absolutely.
you have Boss, who was a female artist, big time female artist connected to Onyx,
Right.
um, back
And
in back in the
and a
night.
lot of these a lot of these a lot of these folks, I mean, we are getting older, but a lot of these folks aren't really old,
Right,
right? When you look at Sean Price, who died,
exactly.
right? You look at uh Guru passed away.
That one hurt.
We're talking about
He
heart
had a heart attack at
conditions,
42.
right?
Yeah,
Right. We're talking about heart prodigy who dealt with sickle cell anemia his whole life. Him passing at a young age. I mean, my brother, that's the amazing producer and rapper that passed away 2 years ago, and his name is coming to me. Uh, it's gonna come to me in a second. Um, Amazing producer that passed away, and I believe he had heart failure as well. And these are young, these aren't old people. They're
right.
older, but we talking 50s, 40s.
Yeah, I think Heavy D passed in his 40s as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a thing. It's probably time to have a more profound conversation about our health, right? So
Very much.
MF Doom is who I'm thinking about.
MF Doom, yeah.
Yeah, Doom passed away, and like it's like what's happening? You know what I mean? Not like
Because
it's
the
crazy.
thought is like you are mm, you have a career that affords you opportunities to address some of these things. Now, I mean, I know some people like, man, if a disease is just ravaging you and
Right.
if you're getting regular checkups, like, can we talk about regular checkups? Like, are you
Yeah, man.
getting regular checkups? What's your mindset on health?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Absolutely.
that's I think that's kind of where our conversation could go and actually could be the topic of a webinar in itself.
Absolutely.
Um, but before we get too deep in the weeds on
Look,
that,
I have to write that down, man. We
all right,
we didn't bump into a discussion we need to have,
yeah.
you know.
Um, well, while you're writing that down, I will I'll let you finish that. But
Well,
that
and also, Dave from De La Soul passed away too, and
that was a hard
just
issue as well, wasn't it?
I believe it was heart failure or cardiac arrest or something of that nature. I'm not sure. But he was very young.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was very young, and it's just unbelievable, like what's really happening out
Yeah.
here to folks. So yeah, man, just yeah, we definitely got to revisit this conversation in that capacity.
All right. So coming up on our final question. Well, final question from our lineup of questions. Has your appreciation for hip hop evolved over time? And if so, how has it shaped your evolving tastes and preferences?
It has evolved for me, yeah. You know, I'm watching hip hop age. I'm watching it become more mature. I'm watching it become more dangerous, more reckless, and and I just think it's important for younger people to see us, right? To see the 40 something, the 50 something year olds who really love hip hop music, who really love the culture, to see us in a professional setting.
Hmm.
I really bring this, I bring myself into library instruction. There's a part in my library sessions where I talk about who I am, where I'm from. I talk about my family. I talk about, that the fact that, both my grandparents moved to this area in the 1950s looking to to do something other than working picking cotton, right?
Right.
I come from those those folks, and I'm proud of that. You know what I'm saying? My granddaddy didn't finish the third grade,
Hmm.
and he worked in the fields. He picked cotton, and him and my grandma, they wanted something different. The same thing. They moved up here. He worked at R.J. Reynolds, and my other grandfather worked in Douglas Battery. I'm a product definitely of my environment, and I bring it into the classroom, and hip hop is a part of that. So
Right.
I may, I'm not, I'm dressed professional, but I may have a little swag to it. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's good for young people to see that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That they
So
don't have to turn themselves down,
absolutely.
so to speak. Um,
You need to make adjustments now. Don't
you,
get me wrong.
you do. You
You
do.
need to make adjustments. And I think they need to see the folks who love this culture as much as they do, how we have made those adjustments and we are successful,
Right.
right? We're in this space where, and we're here to help, and we're here to be a resource, and we're here to give back to our community. We're here to talk about the positive and negative effects, and we want to take everything that's good from this and try to move past all things that's bad, right?
Right.
So yeah, my perspective on hip hop, I love it as just as much. I love it now just as much as I did before. And I think anything that you love, you definitely have to be critical of it because it makes it better,
Right.
and we want it to be better, especially for younger generations. So it's for personal, personally for me, I think it needs to be part of certain discussions,
Hmm.
academic discussions, discussions in our community, because the reality is it has a major influence. Hip hop has a major influence on the youth. It has a major influence in our community. So how can we draw out the best of it, right? And push past anything that we don't need, right?
Right.
So that's where I'm at. And And I think that's all right, man. Just it's anything you love, you got to be critical. Anything that love you is going to be critical of you,
Yes.
right? We know that from experience. Through relationships, anything. So it's not that we being hard on it or being hard on you. It's just we want the best out of it. So we have to evolve. If you're not evolving, if you still that same guy or that same girl that you was 15 years ago. It's something your growth is being stunted. So
Exactly.
so we have to look at the genre. We have to recognize different genres of it. We have to recognize different ways it's branched off
Hmm.
and have that conversation because it's a lot of people that equate anything to black culture.
Right.
And everything is not black, everything is not culture, cultural, right? But and we really need to start drawing a line in the sand of what our culture is.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And be gatekeepers of it because that's what a lot of people do, and that's okay. I respect Chinese culture, Japanese culture, and wherever else. When that line is drawn, you respect it. But I think in the black community, when we start to draw lines, there's always a discussion. There's a debate about that line that's drawn. And I think, we need to be the ones that set the tone and say, nah, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And
We have
this is
to
what it ain't. And
have
this is
to
what it ain't.
right. We have to evaluate it and then move forward with emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're coming close to the end of our time, but before you go,
Yeah. That's what's up, man. Don't hit me with nothing crazy now. What's the surprise?
give me your top five.
Top five what?
MCs.
Oh my
Oh, wait, well,
goodness.
hold on, because I had to make adjustments for
Shoo.
a different interview. So, okay, let me give you a choice: your top five MCs, top
Uh-huh.
five groups,
God.
or top five producers.
Oh, I just did top five producers in my
Yeah, you
head the
did.
other
Yeah.
day. Man, listen.
Well, you mentioned some earlier, so
I did, man. It's evolved over time.
it
It's
should.
changed over time. And
It should, because your list should change all the time. Because
it does.
Kendrick Lamar is bumping some people off of mine from 20 years
Yeah,
ago. So
yeah.
yeah,
So I'm gonna go with top producers.
okay,
Um, man, this is tough. So, and this is no order, right?
right,
It's just these are I know they gonna give me one. Right. I know they never let me down.
right.
Pete Rock is one of my favorite producers. DJ Premier,
Oh, man,
DJ Premier. Yeah, he's at one
Immac-
point you didn't make
immaculate.
it. At one point you ain't made it until you was on the Premier track. So um, three I'd say Jay Dilla.
Yeah,
Um, I'm gonna say it, man. Kanye West is one of the greatest and I'm talking before Mama passed. Kanye, you know what
yeah.
I'm saying? Like,
I say pre-Kardashian, but
yeah,
yeah,
pre-Kardashian, yeah, yeah, college dropout, all the graduation, all of that.
I'm,
That's
I'm gonna let you say your last one, but I'm gonna circle back to Kanye before we go, just real quick.
this one is not very pop. It's not a popular selection. It's because I think his whole career he's gone under the radar, and he's part of really a group, that they really don't highlight and emphasize how much impact he's had on their music overall. And he just passed away too,
Hmm.
talking about dealing with health and addiction and things like that. But that's Rico Wade
Yes, sir.
from Outkast,
Yeah,
Dungeon Family. I
Dungeon
mean,
Family.
he he that his music from Outkast to De La Soul to I'm sorry, Outkast to Goody Mob, all the way to Cool Breeze
Slim
to
not
I
Slim
mean,
Slim Calhoun.
well, yeah, Slim Calhoun. He's done music with TLC. I mean, he's impacted the culture so greatly, and the brother passed away, and he dealt with a lot in his life.
Yeah,
But yeah, he is definitely moved into one of my favorite producers of all time.
yeah,
So, but that the a top five anything is hard. But
yeah.
I left out some amazing producers, and
And
yeah,
and that's another thing. We may have to do something at conference that deals with the rubric,
yeah,
the rubric of the top five. But like I said, I was gonna circle back to Kanye.
mhm,
I don't count him out, even though he's kind of off in left field right now. And
mhm,
the reason why I don't is because when he first came out, like I said, pre-Kardashian, everything pre-Kardashian, he was the person, probably the artist I related to the most as how I moved in society. He's that guy, um he wasn't the drug dealer, um, wasn't the thug, so to speak. went to school, went to school on a high level, even though he did drop out. But
Right.
it's just that kind of that trek to college type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I just related to him more so on a personal level
Yeah.
because of where he was going through or what he was going through or where he was when he became that producer and that rapper
Yeah.
prior
I
to
think
all the fashion stuff, all that.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So he drew me in because it's just like,
Everyday life.
yeah,
Everyday life. People underestimated him. People counted him out. He had a real, story. His art is incredible.
right.
Um, and he's a regular guy, right?
Was
He ain't right. I mean, he ain't out here talking about killing nobody. He ain't selling no drugs. He's just a young black man trying to figure out life,
right,
and that's what he rapped about. And it resonated especially with me too, man. And it just is his ear for soul music is damn near unmatched.
right.
It's damn near unmatched.
Yeah, he's up there. Like people kind of look at strange when you call him a genius, but I mean,
Yeah. Well,
in
yeah.
that lane, he is like,
He's remarkable.
he's not running the mill. So
Right. He's remarkable. I mean, that's no question.
right. Well, Carlos,
Yeah.
no, Los the librarian. Appreciate your time, brother. We had a great conversation,
Yeah,
and
man.
this conversation will continue in some capacity at the next North Carolina Library Association conference. We will get that figured out because
Let's do it.
I think we're gonna have either a good workshop or a good session.
Absolutely. I'm for it. I appreciate y'all, man. This has been a great idea, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. So
All right.
let's do it.
All right.
All right, bro.
That's our time. Jasmine.